The evening sun cast long shadows across the police station parking lot as Captain Ray Bennett sat in his patrol car, scrolling through his phone. His thumb moved mechanically, pausing occasionally to tap a like or leave a comment. He wasn't reading anything, not really. He was counting likes, shares, and views. Numbers that seemed to matter more with each passing day. 50,000 views, he muttered, staring at a video posted by an officer from the neighboring district. The clip showed a dramatic arrest, complete with a foot chase and takedown. The comment section overflowed with praise. Hero cop takes down thug, read one comment with over 300 likes. Ray tossed his phone onto the passenger seat and rubbed his tired eyes. 23 years on the force, and what did he have to show for it? A captain's badge that felt heavier each day, a divorce finalized last spring, and a growing distance between him and his teenage daughter. In the station, things weren't much better. The younger officers barely acknowledged him, huddling instead around Officer Parker, who'd gone viral last month for rescuing a dog from a drainage pipe. The mayor had even presented Parker with a community service award, the kind of recognition Ray had never received despite his decades of service. Ray grabbed his phone again and opened his own social media profile. His last post, a standard department photo at a community event, had garnered a measly 17 likes. 17. Even his brother-in-law's pictures of homegrown tomatoes did better. His radio crackled, pulling him from his thoughts. "Captain Bennett, Chief wants to see you before you head out." Ray sighed. "Copy that. On my way." Chief Wilson didn't look up when Ray entered his office. He was watching something on his computer, his face illuminated by the blue light of the screen. "You wanted to see me, Chief?" Chief Wilson gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Take a look at this, Ray." Ray walked around to see the screen. It was a news clip about a police officer in Memphis who'd become an overnight sensation after a video of him helping a homeless man went viral. The officer now had a book deal and was making appearances on morning talk shows. 5 million views, Chief Wilson said, leaning back in his chair. The department's social media following tripled. Applications to their police academy are up 60%. Ray nodded, unsure why he was being shown this. "The mayor's been on my case about our public image," Wilson continued. "Says we need to connect better with the community, especially with all the negative press law enforcement's been getting. We need some positive stories coming out of this department." "I understand, sir." Wilson fixed him with a pointed stare. "You used to be our star, Ray. Back in the day you were in the paper every other week. The face of this department." Ray shifted uncomfortably. Those days felt like another lifetime. Before budget cuts, before the new performance metrics, before his marriage fell apart. "The mayor specifically asked about you," Wilson added. "Wondered why we don't see Captain Bennett in the news anymore." The implication was clear. Ray wasn't just failing to stand out, he was being noticed for his absence. "I'll try to be more visible in the community," Ray offered, knowing how hollow the word sounded. Wilson nodded, already turning back to his computer. "Do that, and Ray, the department review is coming up next month. The board's looking at restructuring. Some positions might be consolidated." The message couldn't have been clearer if Wilson had written it out. "Produce results or clear out your desk." Ray left the station with a knot in his stomach. He drove aimlessly, eventually pulling into the parking lot of a diner he used to frequent when he worked patrol in this area. Through the window he could see it was nearly empty, just a couple at one booth and an older man reading a newspaper at the counter. Inside, the smell of coffee and grilled onions brought back memories of simpler times. Ray slid onto a stool at the counter, nodding to the older man 2 seats down. "Coffee black," he told the waitress, a tired-looking woman whose name tag read Darlene. "You got it," she said, already pouring the cup. "You a cop?" Ray glanced down at himself. He wasn't in uniform, just slacks and a button-up shirt. "How'd you know?" Darlene smiled. "Been serving cops for 30 years. You all have the same look." She set the coffee in front of him. "Food?" "Just the coffee for now." As Darlene moved away, Ray pulled out his phone again. He opened a police community forum he followed and scrolled through recent posts. One thread caught his eye. "How I went viral. Officer tips for social media success." The post was from a cop in Chicago who'd gained fame after a dashcam video showed him talking a man out of suicide. The officer had followed up with carefully crafted posts about mental health awareness, building a following of over 200,000 people. He was now a regular speaker at police conferences across the country. Ray read every word, then clicked on similar threads. A pattern emerged. Officers who'd managed to capture attention usually did so through videos showing them in action, making arrests, chasing suspects, or performing community service. The more dramatic, the better. His coffee grew cold as he fell deeper into the rabbit hole. One post particularly caught his attention. Nothing gets views like a good arrest video. Bonus points if the perp resists. Ray's phone buzzed with a text from his daughter. "Dad, you still coming to my recital Saturday?" He'd completely forgotten. "Wouldn't miss it," he typed back, feeling a familiar pang of guilt. He paid for his coffee and headed back to his car. The sun had set fully now, leaving the parking lot bathed in the harsh glow of streetlights. As he drove through the city streets, Ray found himself paying more attention to people on the sidewalks, assessing them with a new perspective. Which one of them could be his ticket to relevance? The thought made him uncomfortable at first, but the discomfort faded as he remembered Wilson's warning about the department restructuring. He had a mortgage, child support payments, and a daughter who'd be heading to college in 2 years. He couldn't afford to lose his position. The next morning, Ray arrived at the station earlier than usual. He'd spent half the night watching videos of officers who'd gone viral, studying their techniques and presentation. Most importantly, he'd formulated a plan. He headed straight for the equipment room where the department stored its body cameras. "Morning, Captain," said the young officer managing the desk. "Need something?" "Just checking out a body cam for today," Ray replied casually. The officer looked surprised. "You doing patrol shifts now?" "Just want to stay sharp," Ray said with a forced smile. "Never know when I might need to jump in." After signing out the equipment, Ray stopped by the locker room to adjust his uniform. He usually wore plain clothes or a more formal uniform for his administrative duties, but today he wanted to look like an officer on active duty. In his patrol car, Ray secured the body camera to his chest and checked that it was working properly. Then he pulled out of the station parking lot, not responding to the dispatcher who asked where he was headed. Ray drove toward the east side of town, where modest homes gave way to apartment complexes and small businesses. This area had seen an uptick in petty crime lately. Nothing major, just shoplifting and the occasional drug arrest. Perfect for what he had in mind. He cruised slowly past corner stores and laundromats, watching people go about their morning routines. A group of teenagers waited at a bus stop. An old woman swept the sidewalk in front of her building. 2 men argued outside a convenience store. Ray kept driving, moving deeper into the neighborhood. This was predominantly Black and Hispanic, with some newer immigrants from West Africa and Southeast Asia. Ray had started his career patrolling these streets before climbing the ranks. Back then, he'd prided himself on knowing the community, on treating people with respect regardless of their background. Now, he found himself looking at them differently, as potential content. He parked near a small park and watched people come and go. A man in a worn jacket sat on a bench drinking from a paper bag. Too easy public intoxication was hardly video-worthy. A group of kids played basketball too young to bother. Then he spotted a young Black man in his late 20s, dressed well in dark jeans and a button-up shirt, walking purposefully toward a small grocery store. Ray watched him through narrowed eyes. The man didn't look like trouble, quite the opposite. He carried himself with confidence, nodded politely to an elderly couple as he passed them. But something about him caught Ray's attention. Perhaps it was simply that he stood out in this neighborhood. He looked like he belonged in the financial district downtown. Not here. Ray touched the body camera to make sure it was recording, then stepped out of his car. His heart beat faster as he followed the man into the store, already thinking about how to approach him, what to say, how to make the interaction notable enough to share. This is it, Ray thought to himself. This could be the one. His first step toward relevance again, toward security, toward not being left behind. What Ray couldn't possibly know was just how right he was, though not in any way he could imagine. The small grocery store smelled of fresh bread and floor cleaner. Ray stepped inside, immediately spotting the well-dressed man at the counter speaking with the owner, an older gentleman with gray hair and laugh lines around his eyes. They seemed familiar with each other, exchanging pleasantries in a way that suggested routine. Ray pretended to browse a display of fruit while straining to hear their conversation. The man was asking about business permits and local regulations, ordinary questions that somehow made Ray more suspicious. Why would someone dressed like that care about small business regulations in this neighborhood? The man thanked the owner and turned to leave, nodding politely to Ray as he passed. Ray waited a few moments before following him out, his hand reflexively checking that the body camera was still recording. Outside, the morning had warmed considerably. The man walked with purpose toward a modest storefront 2 blocks down that appeared to be under renovation. A sign in the window read, "Coming Soon Community Tech Hub." Ray frowned. He hadn't heard about any new business opening in the area. The man unlocked the door and disappeared inside. Ray stood across the street considering his next move. He could approach the man now, but on what grounds? He needed something that would justify an interaction, preferably something that would look good on camera. His radio crackled. "All units be advised of reports of a suspicious individual possibly casing storefronts on Oakwood Avenue." Ray's pulse quickened. Oakwood was 1 street over, close enough to justify checking this place out. He keyed his radio. Captain Bennett responding to suspicious person call on Oakwood. The dispatcher's voice carried a note of surprise. "Copy that, Captain. Patrol units are en route. I'm already in the area," Ray said quickly. "I'll make initial contact." Ray crossed the street with renewed confidence, straightening his uniform as he approached the storefront. Through the large windows, he could see the man inside, examining the walls and making notes on a tablet. Ray rapped sharply on the glass with his knuckles. The man looked up, momentarily startled, then set down his tablet and came to the door. He opened it with a polite but questioning expression. "Can I help you, officer?" His voice was deep and measured, with the careful enunciation of someone who chose their words deliberately. Ray stood taller. "I'm Captain Bennett. We've had reports of suspicious activity in the area. Mind if I ask what you're doing here?" If the man was offended by the question, he didn't show it. "Of course. I'm Thomas Wilson. I'm opening a technology education center here next month." He gestured to the space behind him. "We'll offer free computer classes, internet access, and tech support to the community." Ray noted the name for later. "Can I see some identification, Mr. Wilson? May I ask why?" The question wasn't confrontational, just curious. Standard procedure when responding to suspicious person calls. Ray lied smoothly. "Just need to verify you are who you say you are." Thomas studied Ray's face for a moment, then nodded. "No problem." He reached for his back pocket with deliberate, slow movements. Ray tensed slightly, a reaction he knew would be visible on camera and would help justify any escalation. The body cam couldn't capture his thoughts, his hope that this interaction might somehow become noteworthy enough to share. Thomas produced a wallet and handed over a driver's license. Ray examined it carefully. Thomas Wilson, 34, with an address in an upscale downtown neighborhood. The photo matched the face in front of him. "This address is quite away from here," Ray commented, keeping his tone casual but letting suspicion color his words. "What brings you to this neighborhood specifically?" "I grew up 3 blocks from here," Thomas replied. "My mother still lives in the house I was raised in. I wanted to give back to the community that shaped me." Ray handed back the license, disappointment settling in his stomach. The man's story was checking out so far, which meant this interaction wasn't likely to yield anything video-worthy. Still, he wasn't ready to give up. "Mind if I take a look around?" A flicker of something, annoyance perhaps, crossed Thomas's face before his expression returned to polite neutrality. "Do you have a warrant, Captain Bennett?" The question was asked respectfully, but Ray felt his irritation rise. "I don't need a warrant if I have reasonable suspicion of criminal activity." "And what criminal activity do you suspect me of exactly?" Ray didn't have a good answer, but he wasn't about to admit that. "Several businesses in the area have reported break-ins. I'm just doing my job, sir." Thomas seemed to consider this, then stepped aside. "I understand. Please come in." Ray entered the space, immediately noting the work in progress. Desks were arranged in rows, though most were still wrapped in plastic. Boxes of computer equipment sat unopened against one wall. The place looked exactly like what Thomas claimed, a community center being set up. "When do you open?" Ray asked, trying to find anything suspicious. 4 weeks from today, Thomas replied. "We're having a grand opening celebration. You're welcome to attend, Captain." We're hoping to build strong relationships with local law enforcement. Ray grunted noncommittally as he continued his inspection. In the back room, he found more boxes and renovation supplies. Nothing unusual. Nothing that would make for compelling content. As he returned to the main room, he noticed Thomas watching him with an unreadable expression. For a brief uncomfortable moment, Ray felt as if he were the one being evaluated. Everything seems to be in order, Ray admitted reluctantly. I'm glad to hear it, Thomas said. Was there anything else you needed, Captain? There wasn't, but Ray wasn't ready to leave empty-handed. An idea struck him, a small deceit that might salvage this interaction. Actually, we've had reports of counterfeit bills circulating in the neighborhood. I noticed you were at the grocery store earlier. Mind if I check any cash you might have on you? Thomas's eyebrows rose slightly. You were following me? Ray felt heat rise to his face. I was responding to the suspicious person call and happened to see you enter this location. Thomas didn't respond immediately. He seemed to be weighing his options. Finally, he said, I don't consent to a search, Captain Bennett. If you have legitimate reason to believe I'm passing counterfeit currency, you'll need to follow proper procedures. Ray hadn't expected such a direct refusal. Most people in this neighborhood, when confronted by a police captain, would simply comply. This man knew his rights and wasn't afraid to assert them. Are you refusing to cooperate with the police investigation? Ray asked, making sure his voice was clear for the body camera. I'm exercising my constitutional rights, Thomas corrected calmly. There's a difference. Ray felt a surge of annoyance followed quickly by anticipation. This could work. A well-dressed black man refusing to comply with police instructions. The comments section would explode. If he could just push a bit further. I'm going to need you to place your hands on the wall and spread your feet, Ray said, his voice hardening. Now, Thomas didn't move. On what grounds, Captain? Suspicious behavior and failure to comply with an officer's instructions. With all due respect, Captain Bennett, I haven't broken any laws. I showed you my ID. I allowed you to inspect my property without a warrant. I've been fully cooperative except for refusing an unlawful search of my person. Ray stepped closer, invading Thomas's personal space. Last chance to cooperate before I place you under arrest. A tense silence filled the room. Ray could hear his own heartbeat, could feel sweat forming at his hairline. This was it. The moment that would make or break his video. Either Thomas would comply, making the interaction forgettable, or he would continue to resist, giving Ray exactly what he needed. To Ray's satisfaction, Thomas stood his ground. I want to speak with your commanding officer, he said quietly. You can do that down at the station, Ray replied, reaching for his handcuffs. Turn around and place your hands behind your back. As he moved to grab Thomas's arm, the front door of the shop swung open. Ray turned, expecting to see one of his officers responding to the suspicious person call. Instead, a woman in a crisp suit entered, her badge already visible on her belt. FBI, she announced, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife. Captain Bennett, I think we need to have a conversation. Ray froze, the handcuffs still in his hand. He looked from the woman to Thomas, whose expression had shifted from calm defiance to something more complex. What's going on here? Ray managed to ask. The woman closed the door behind her. I'm Special Agent Chen, and you've just attempted to make an unlawful arrest of my colleague, Special Agent Wilson. Ray's stomach dropped as Agent Wilson pulled out a badge of his own from an inside pocket. I don't understand, Ray said, though the terrible truth was already dawning on him. I think you do. Captain, Agent Chen said, her voice level but her eyes hard. And I think that body camera you're wearing has captured everything we need to know about your intentions here today. Ray's hand moved instinctively to the camera on his chest, but it was too late. Much too late. The handcuffs felt suddenly heavy in Ray's grip. He lowered them slowly, his mind racing to make sense of what was happening. The small storefront seemed to shrink around him as both FBI agents watched him with steady gazes. There's been a misunderstanding, Ray said, trying to keep his voice level. I was responding to a suspicious person call. Agent Chen raised an eyebrow. Were you? Because dispatch has no record of any such call in this area today. A cold sensation spread through Ray's chest. His own dispatch team would have logs of all radio traffic. His fabricated response to a non-existent call was already documented. I think we should continue this conversation somewhere more private, Agent Wilson suggested, his tone neutral but firm. Agent Chen nodded. I agree. Captain Bennett, would you accompany us to our field office? Your chief has already been notified. The mention of Chief Wilson sent another wave of dread through Ray. The chief knows about this? He will shortly, Agent Chen replied. We have a courtesy meeting scheduled with him in 1 hour. You're welcome to join us there instead of coming to our office if you prefer. It wasn't really an option. It was a choice between two equally humiliating scenarios. Either way, his career was likely over. I'll meet you at the station, Ray said stiffly. That works, Agent Wilson said. And Captain, I'll need you to surrender your weapon and badge temporarily, as per FBI protocol when questioning an officer about potential civil rights violations. The words hit Ray like physical blows. Potential civil rights violations. In 23 years of policing, he'd never faced such an accusation. This is completely unnecessary, Ray protested, though he made no move to comply. I was doing my job. Were you? Agent Wilson asked quietly. Because from where I stand, it looked like you were trying to manufacture a reason to arrest me. He gestured to the body camera still recording on Ray's chest. That footage should make for interesting viewing. Ray's hand moved to the camera again, his finger hovering over the power button. I wouldn't, Agent Chen warned. Tampering with evidence would only make your situation worse. Ray dropped his hand. He slowly removed his service weapon and badge, handing them to Agent Chen with as much dignity as he could muster. 1 hour, Captain, she said, securing his gun and badge in her briefcase. Don't be late. The walk back to his patrol car felt like the longest of Ray's life. Each step was heavy with the weight of what had just happened, what he had just done. He climbed into the driver's seat but didn't start the engine immediately. Instead, he sat in silence, staring at his empty hands. What had he been thinking? 23 years of building a reputation, of trying to be one of the good ones, and he'd thrown it all away for what? A chance at social media fame, a desperate grab at relevance in a world that seemed to be leaving him behind. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A text from his daughter. Don't forget my recital starts at 6, not 7. Ray closed his eyes. He'd forgotten again, and now he might not even be able to attend. He might be sitting in an interview room instead, trying to explain actions he barely understood himself. He started the car and drove toward the station, his mind churning through possible explanations, excuses, defenses. None of them sounded convincing even to himself. At the station, the atmosphere was tense when he arrived. Officers glanced at him and quickly looked away. Word had spread fast. Ray kept his head high as he walked through the bullpen, ignoring the whispers that followed him. Chief Wilson was waiting in his office, his face a mask of controlled anger. He gestured for Ray to close the door. What the hell were you thinking? The chief demanded once they were alone. It's not what it looks like, Ray began. Save it, Chief Wilson cut him off. The FBI has been investigating civil rights complaints in our department for months. Months, Ray? And you just handed them exactly what they needed on a silver platter. Civil rights complaints? About who? The chief gave him an incredulous look. You really don't know? Officers in this department have been targeting black men in that neighborhood for minor offenses, escalating encounters unnecessarily, and posting the videos online for likes and follows. He leaned forward, his voice lowering. Sound familiar? Ray felt sick. I wasn't. Stop, the chief said. Just stop. I've seen the preliminary report. You followed that man from the grocery store, questioned him without cause, attempted to search him without consent, and were about to arrest him when Agent Chen intervened. And your body camera caught it all. I was responding to a call. There was no call. Chief Wilson slammed his hand on the desk. Do you think I'm an idiot? Dispatch logs everything. Ray fell silent. There was nothing he could say. The chief sighed heavily, some of the anger draining from his face replaced by disappointment. What happened to you, Ray? You used to be one of the best officers I had. You cared about the community, about doing the job right. Ray had no answer. He barely recognized himself anymore. A knock at the door interrupted them. Chief Wilson called for the person to enter. It was Officer Rodriguez, looking uncomfortable. Sir, the FBI agents are here. Send them in, the chief said, then turned back to Ray. This conversation isn't over. Agents Wilson and Chen entered, both carrying briefcases. They greeted the chief professionally before acknowledging Ray with cool nods. Thank you for meeting with us, Chief Wilson, Agent Chen said. As we discussed on the phone, we're conducting an investigation into potential civil rights violations by officers in your department. I understand, the chief replied. Captain Bennett is prepared to cooperate. Fully. Ray opened his mouth to protest but caught the warning, glare from his superior, and remained silent. Agent Wilson set his briefcase on the table and removed a laptop. Before we begin formal questioning, I think it would be helpful for Captain Bennett to see something. He opened the laptop and turned it so all of them could see the screen. It showed a split view. One side displayed footage from Ray's body camera from earlier that day. The other side showed a different angle of the same encounter. We had surveillance cameras installed in and around the tech hub, Agent Wilson explained. Standard procedure for an undercover operation. Ray watched in growing horror as the scene played out from both perspectives. His body camera showed Thomas Wilson, Agent Wilson, being cooperative and respectful while asserting his rights. The surveillance footage showed Ray's increasingly aggressive posture, his invasion of personal space, his hand hovering near his weapon. It looked bad. Worse than bad. When the video ended, there was a heavy silence in the room. This is just one incident, Agent Chen said finally, but it fits a pattern we've been seeing in this department. Officers targeting black men without cause, escalating situations unnecessarily, and sharing the resulting videos on social media for likes and follows. I wasn't going to share it, Ray protested weakly. Agent Wilson gave him a long look. Then why were you wearing a body camera when you normally don't? Why did you respond to a call that never happened? Why did you follow me from the grocery store? Ray had no answers. We've been tracking several officers in your department, Agent Chen continued, addressing the chief. Their social media accounts show a disturbing pattern. They're competing for views, for engagement, and they're using citizens, predominantly black citizens, as unwilling participants in their content. Chief Wilson looked sick. I had no idea. That's part of the problem, Agent Wilson said. Lack of oversight has allowed this culture to flourish. Ray sat in stunned silence as they discussed his department, his colleagues, patterns of behavior he'd either ignored or been blind to. All the while, the image of himself on that video screen burned in his mind. The way he'd stood, the way he'd spoken, the naked ambition in his eyes. What happens now? Ray asked finally. Agent Chen turned to him. That depends partly on you, Captain Bennett. We'll need a formal statement. We'll need access to your phone, your social media accounts, your private messages with other officers. And if I cooperate? Ray asked. We're more interested in the pattern than in any single officer, Agent Wilson said. Your cooperation could help us address the systemic issues at play here. Ray looked at his chief, then back at the FBI agents. He thought about his daughter's recital, about the man he'd once been, the officer who'd cared about protecting people rather than going viral at their expense. I'll cooperate, he said quietly. Whatever you need, Agent Chen nodded. That's a start, Captain. She slid a document across the table. This outlines the next steps. We'll need you at our field office tomorrow morning at 9. As they continued discussing details, Ray's thoughts drifted to the irony of his situation. He'd wanted relevance, wanted to be noticed again. Now he had exactly that, but not in any way he'd imagined. His name would indeed be known, his face recognized, but as a cautionary tale rather than a hero. In trying to avoid becoming obsolete, he'd instead become exactly what he'd spent most of his career fighting against. Ray sat in his car in the parking lot of his daughter's school, watching families stream into the auditorium for the evening recital. He'd been sitting there for 20 minutes, unable to make himself get out of the car. His phone showed 3 missed calls from his ex-wife, no doubt wondering where he was. The meeting with the FBI agents and Chief Wilson had lasted longer than expected. By the time they finished, Ray had surrendered his phone, signed multiple documents, and been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. Chief Wilson had made it clear this was just the beginning. Ray checked his watch. The recital would start in 10 minutes. His daughter would be backstage now, probably nervous, definitely looking for him in the audience when she came out. He couldn't let her down. Not today, not after everything else. He finally got out of the car and walked toward the school, his steps heavy. Without his badge and gun, he felt strangely light, as if parts of his identity had been physically removed. In a way, they had. The school auditorium was nearly full. Ray spotted his ex-wife Lisa in the third row. She'd saved him a seat despite everything. When she saw him, her expression shifted from annoyance to concern. "You look terrible," she whispered as he sat down beside her. "Rough day," he replied, not meeting her eyes. "Is everything okay?" Ray almost laughed at the question. Nothing was okay. His career was likely over. He might face charges. His reputation would be destroyed. But he just nodded and said, "Let's talk after." The lights dimmed and the principal walked onto the stage to make introductions. Ray tried to focus, but his mind kept replaying the events of the day. The grocery store, the tech hub, the damning video footage, Chief Wilson's disappointment. The curtain rose, revealing a group of teenagers with various instruments. Ray spotted his daughter immediately seated at the piano. She scanned the audience as the first piece began, and he saw the moment she found him. The slight relaxation in her shoulders. The brief smile before she turned her attention to the music. Something tightened in Ray's chest. Despite everything, she still looked for him. Still wanted him there. Still believed in him in a way he no longer believed in himself. As the music filled the auditorium, Ray's thoughts drifted to Agent Wilson. He'd seemed so ordinary in the grocery store, just another man going about his day. Yet he'd been undercover, watching, gathering evidence of a pattern Ray hadn't even recognized he was part of. What had Agent Wilson seen in the weeks or months he'd been in the neighborhood? How many officers had he observed doing exactly what Ray had attempted to do? The thought made Ray's stomach turn. The recital passed in a blur. When it ended, Ray applauded mechanically, pride in his daughter mingling with shame about himself. As people began to leave, Lisa touched his arm. "We're taking Allie for ice cream to celebrate," she said. "Are you coming?" Ray hesitated. He wanted nothing more than to spend time with his daughter, to pretend for a few hours that his life wasn't falling apart. But he couldn't. "Not tonight, I can't," he said. "I need to prepare some things for tomorrow." Lisa's eyes narrowed. "What's going on, Ray? And don't tell me nothing because I know you too well for that." Before he could respond, their daughter approached, still flushed with the excitement of performance. "Dad, you made it!" She hugged him tightly. Ray returned the embrace, holding on perhaps a moment too long. "Wouldn't have missed it for the world, kiddo." "You were amazing." "Really? I messed up that one part in the middle." "Couldn't tell," Ray assured her with a smile that took more effort than it should have. "Absolutely perfect." "We're getting ice cream," Lisa told her. "Unfortunately, your dad can't join us." Disappointment flashed across their daughter's face. "Why not?" Ray swallowed hard. "Work stuff, sweetheart." "Rain check?" She nodded, though her smile had dimmed. "Promise?" "Promise," Ray said, the word feeling hollow even as he spoke it. What promises could he make now, when he didn't know what tomorrow would bring? After they left, Ray drove aimlessly through the city. He couldn't go home. The emptiness of his apartment would only amplify his thoughts. He couldn't go to a bar. The last thing he needed was alcohol clouding his already poor judgment. Eventually, he found himself in the neighborhood where he'd encountered Agent Wilson that morning. The streets were quieter now, though still alive with the rhythm of evening routines. People sat on stoops. Children played in the last light of day. Music drifted from open windows. Ray parked and walked, hands in his pockets, head down. No one recognized him without his uniform, or if they did, they chose not to acknowledge him. He was just another middle-aged man walking alone, lost in thought. He paused outside the tech hub. The lights were off, the space empty. What would it have been like if Agent Wilson had actually been opening a community center here? Would Ray have supported it, visited it, seen it as a valuable addition to the neighborhood? Or would he have viewed it with suspicion as he had that morning? Ray continued walking, turning down streets at random. He passed corner stores, apartment buildings, a small playground. He'd patrolled these streets early in his career, had known the names of business owners, had greeted residents by name. When had that changed? When had these people become props in his mind rather than citizens he was sworn to protect and serve? His phone vibrated in his pocket, a text from a number he didn't recognize. "Captain Bennett, this is Agent Chen. Just a reminder about our 9 a.m. meeting tomorrow. Please bring the items we discussed." Reality crashed back. Tomorrow he would sit in an FBI field office and detail his actions, his motivations, potentially implicating colleagues in the process. He would be labeled a rat by some, a corrupt cop by others. There would be no winning. Ray found himself outside a small diner, not the same one he'd visited the previous evening, but similar. Through the window he could see it was nearly empty. He went inside, took a seat at the counter, and ordered coffee. The waitress, a woman with tired eyes and graying hair, placed the mug in front of him without comment. Ray stared into the dark liquid, seeing his own distorted reflection. "Rough day?" the waitress asked after a while. Ray looked up, surprised by the question. "You could say that," she nodded sagely. "Got that look about you, like the world's sitting on your shoulders." "Something like that," Ray agreed. "Well, whatever it is, tomorrow's another day," she said, refilling his mug, though he'd barely touched it. "Fresh start and all that." Ray almost smiled at the platitude. If only it were that simple. Some things you can't start fresh from. Maybe, she conceded. But you can start from where you are. The simplicity of her words struck Ray. Start from where you are. He was a man who had lost his way, who had compromised his values, who had nearly destroyed an innocent person's life for his own gain. That was where he was. That was what he had to start from. His phone buzzed again. A text from Lisa. "Allie wants to know if you're coming to her band performance next week." Next week. Would he even be free next week? Would he be facing charges? Would he still have a job? Ray typed back, "Wouldn't miss it." Then he added, "Tell her I'm proud of her." He paid for his coffee and left the diner. Outside, the night had fully settled in, the streets illuminated by streetlights and the glow from windows. Ray walked back to his car with new resolve. Tomorrow would be difficult, perhaps the most difficult day of his professional life. But he would face it. He would tell the truth, not just about what had happened that morning, but about the culture that had developed in his department. The competition for likes and views, the way citizens had become content rather than people, and whatever came after. Whether he lost his badge permanently, whether he faced charges, whether his name became synonymous with police corruption, he would accept it. Because the alternative, continuing down the path he'd been on, was unthinkable. Back in his car, Ray noticed a piece of paper on the passenger seat that hadn't been there before. He picked it up cautiously. It was a business card for the FBI field office with Agent Wilson's name and direct number. On the back, handwritten, "It's never too late to remember why you became an officer in the first place." Ray stared at the card, wondering when Agent Wilson had placed it in his car and how he'd known where to find it. Then again, the FBI agent had proven he was good at his job. Remember why you became an officer in the first place. Ray tucked the card into his pocket and started the car. For the first time that day, he knew exactly where he was going. The FBI field office was housed in a nondescript building downtown, its exterior giving no hint of the activities within. Ray arrived 15 minutes early, parked in the visitor section, and sat in his car gathering his thoughts. He'd barely slept, spending most of the night organizing old emails, text messages, and notes that might be relevant to the investigation. At exactly 8:45, Ray entered the building, passed through security, and was escorted to a conference room where Agents Wilson and Chen were already waiting. "Good morning, Captain Bennett," Agent Chen greeted him. "Thank you for being punctual." Ray nodded, taking the seat across from them. He placed a folder and his personal phone on the table. "I brought everything I could think of that might be helpful," he said. "Emails, texts between officers, notes from meetings where social media presence was discussed. It's all there." Agent Wilson raised an eyebrow, clearly not expecting this level of preparation. "That's thorough. I meant what I said yesterday. I want to cooperate fully." Ray met his gaze steadily. "I also want to apologize for my actions. What I did was wrong, and there's no excuse for it." A brief silence followed. Agent Chen glanced at her colleague before responding. "Your cooperation is noted, Captain. But you should understand that this doesn't erase what happened." "I know," Ray said. "I'm not looking for erasure. Just a chance to make things right, whatever that might look like." Agent Wilson leaned forward. "Tell us how it started. Not just with you, but in the department. When did officers begin posting these videos? When did it become a competition?" Ray took a deep breath and began to explain. He told them about budget cuts that had led to fewer promotions, about performance metrics that increasingly emphasized community visibility, about younger officers who had grown up with social media and saw it as a path to advancement. "But that doesn't excuse what we did," he added. "What I did. Somewhere along the way, we lost sight of who we were supposed to be protecting and serving. For the next 3 hours, Ray answered questions, provided names, described incidents. He held nothing back, even when the answers reflected poorly on him. By noon, they had filled pages of notes and recorded hours of testimony. "I think we should take a break," Agent Chen suggested, noticing Ray's fatigue. "There's a cafeteria on the second floor." Ray nodded gratefully. As they stood to leave, Agent Wilson touched his arm. "Why the change of heart, Captain? Yesterday you were ready to arrest me on false charges. Today you're practically writing our case for us." Ray considered the question. "Your note," he said finally, "about remembering why I became an officer. It made me think about the kid I was 25 years ago, who just wanted to make his neighborhood safer. Somewhere along the way, I forgot that kid." Agent Wilson studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Food's decent in the cafeteria. Try the turkey sandwich." After lunch, they resumed the interview. This time, the questions focused more on potential solutions than past problems. "If you could change the culture in your department, where would you start?" Agent Chen asked. Ray thought carefully before answering. "Training, not just about policies and procedures, but about the communities we serve. History, context, understanding the impact of our presence, and accountability. Real consequences for officers who violate public trust, not just reassignment or paid leave." By late afternoon, they had covered everything the agents wanted to discuss. Agent Chen collected the materials Ray had brought and handed him a receipt. "What happens now?" Ray asked. "We continue our investigation," she replied. "Your testimony will be extremely helpful, but we need to corroborate everything. It's likely we'll have more questions in the coming days." "And my job?" Agent Wilson closed his notebook. "That's not entirely up to us. We'll be meeting with your chief and the mayor next week. Your cooperation will be noted in our report." Ray nodded, understanding the unspoken message. His career as he knew it was over, but perhaps not his chance to make a difference. "There's one more thing," Agent Wilson said, reaching into his briefcase. He pulled out a small flash drive. "This contains footage from various surveillance cameras in the neighborhood over the past month. Officers interacting with citizens, making arrests, some of which ended up on social media. I'd like you to review it." Ray took the drive, confused. "Why? You already have my statement." "Because I want you to see it through new eyes," Agent Wilson replied. "Not as a police captain, but as the kid who wanted to make his neighborhood safer." Ray pocketed the drive and stood to leave. At the door, he paused. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry." "I know," Agent Wilson said. "That's why I left the card." The next few weeks passed in a blur of interviews, depositions, and meetings. The investigation expanded beyond Ray's department to include neighboring precincts. Several officers were placed on leave. Others, seeing the writing on the wall, resigned. Ray watched it unfold from the sidelines. His administrative leave continued, and though he hadn't been charged with any crimes, his future remained uncertain. He used the time to reconnect with his daughter, attending not just her performances but her practices as well. He had dinner with his ex-wife, conversations that were awkward at first but gradually eased into something resembling friendship. And he watched the videos on the flash drive. Again and again, seeing his colleagues, seeing himself through new eyes. The casual disrespect, the unnecessary escalations, the performances for the camera. It all looked so obvious now, so indefensible. 1 month after his encounter with Agent Wilson, Ray received a call from Chief Wilson asking him to come to the station. He arrived to find the chief in a meeting with the mayor, Agent Chen, and Agent Wilson. "Captain Bennett," the mayor greeted him, gesturing to an empty chair. "Thank you for joining us." Ray sat, noting the serious expressions around the table. "What's this about?" Chief Wilson cleared his throat. "As you know, our department has been under federal investigation for civil rights violations. That investigation is now complete." Ray nodded, bracing himself for what would come next. "Based on the findings," the chief continued, "significant changes will be implemented immediately. New training protocols, community oversight boards, body camera requirements, and a complete overhaul of our social media policies." "And my status?" Ray asked. The mayor leaned forward. "That's why we asked you here today. Your cooperation with the investigation was noted in the federal report. So is your previous record of community policing before recent events." "We've been discussing your future with the department," Chief Wilson added. "Your actions cannot be overlooked. but neither can your willingness to help address the underlying issues. Agent Chen opened a folder. The Department of Justice is establishing a new unit focused on police reform and community relations. They're looking for officers with both inside knowledge of problematic practices and a commitment to changing them. Ray looked around the table, trying to understand what they were suggesting. Are you offering me a job? Not exactly, Agent Wilson said. We're offering you a chance to use what you've learned, both from your mistakes and from your 23 years of service, to help other departments avoid the same pitfalls. It would mean resignation from your current position, the mayor clarified, but it would also mean your experience doesn't go to waste. Ray sat back, stunned. It wasn't forgiveness, not exactly, but it was something he hadn't dared hope for. A purpose. I'd need time to think about it, he said finally. Of course, Agent Chen replied, sliding a business card across the table. Take a few days. After the meeting, Ray found himself walking toward the tech hub. The renovation was complete now, the grand opening scheduled for the following weekend. Through the window, he could see computers set up on desks, colorful posters on the walls, a small gathering area with comfortable chairs. It's really happening, a voice said beside him. Ray turned to find Agent Wilson, or Thomas as he now thought of him, standing there. Your cover wasn't entirely fake then? Ray asked. Thomas shook his head. The FBI believes in community investment as part of our work. This center will provide technology access, job training, and a safe space for neighborhood kids. And yes, I did grow up 3 blocks from here. They stood in silence for a moment, watching a group of volunteers arrange books on shelves inside. About that offer, Ray said finally. I think I want to do it, Thomas nodded. I thought you might. It won't be easy, you know. You'll face resistance, resentment, skepticism. I know. But if I can help prevent even one officer from making the mistakes I made, it would be worth it. Thomas extended his hand. The grand opening is Sunday at noon. We could use another volunteer if you're interested. Ray took his hand. Feeling the weight of the past month, the uncertainty of the future, and for the first time in a long while, the clarity of purpose. I'll be there, he said. As they parted ways, Ray looked back at the tech hub, at the neighborhood around it. The same streets he'd once patrolled as a rookie, full of hope and determination to make a difference. Things had come full circle, in a way he never could have anticipated. He'd wanted relevance, recognition, a way to matter in a changing world. He'd nearly destroyed himself and others in that pursuit. But now, through the very public fall that had resulted, he'd found a different kind of purpose, not in likes or views or viral moments, but in the harder, quieter work of change. It wasn't the ending he'd expected. It was better and truer than anything he could have imagined.